Robert DeNiro came through campuses where campuses A through Z and the differences of them was used by a breaching method that actively has the self-valued roles with other communicators for James Madison and for the founders behind him and his plan. Then they communicated. And the nature of debate and the natures of resolutions of debates and of legal cases. It was is employed by a breaching method where names on all sides of criminal and civil cases increasingly and the interbranch names and the intelligence, foreign and domestic, as they are, too, directed to hide that. But there are exceptions. But where and how they use exceptions, exception nature, is how they were shown as collusion slash S at all ages and natures of campuses, including fire campuses and medical campuses, which hospitals are medical campuses. I am not a doctor. I am not a lawyer. I am not a journalist. All three of those professions originally and still have roles with all bunch of natures of organized crimes, methods, recorded. See, everyone was backed as into being styles of victims slash hyper victims that had self-valued roles with logic needs and natures that are reliant upon principles of thought that can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract short words with convictions proper by America's founders, by James Madison's plan, and about that breaching method, that how it was actually entrenched and what it was actually value as, and how other has been gotten away with so long with music playing in the background, right through the generations, and descriptions of other, because in other words they blame on other things, others, or selves. One of the reasons, for example, they have criminally foreign influence readings of the sciences, roles, and of the religions. We have this as we recorded. We all know this. See, people, because of other interests, needs, and apparent, they'll jump into people's conversations. And what is actually recorded involved with that is all we need to discern to overcome this at countries A through Z. This breaching method knew effectively uses how countries A through Z left and leave out not just the breaching method slash S, but roles with recorded use slash S conscious of other things, others, or selves, blamed for things that our founders and nature itself demonstrates for us to blame on the human factory nature breaching method. Nature itself demonstrates this to us, for example, because if we make a list in our minds, as this hyper programming method too appreciates lists in ways that artificial intelligence can't afford discerned. See, the bar itself, the sciences themselves, and the names of the people of the sciences that came through campuses A through Z, with those databases, relationships before computers even, and unceasingly since. These are identities of relativity slash hyper-relativity to ourselves, at all natures of conjunction slash hyper-conjunction to ourselves. See, but we are being and haven't been. But well, what the heck is that? In other words, that's why it's important for people to stay with the short words, like World Trade Center attack, WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. In some ways, it's all on them. Some ways, it's all on the intelligence next to them. And as the same name is involved next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut. WFSB is in Rock Hill, Connecticut. And they're also being influenced to pretend it's personal. because they have roles with all kinds. Originally and still, for example, one of the things that history was about, what witch trials were about, even if they're completely made up, whatever, the witch trial location is still about that human fact. Like there's a witch trial location in Wethersfield, Connecticut, or Wethersfield, Connecticut, where George Washington had to come right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, and he had to counter extort people, key people, and force them to break the rules of a whole bunch of different countries. I learned that at Central Connecticut State University. There were laws that if anyone was found out to even have been speaking about building infrastructure outside of internationally monitored conversations, they killed those people and everyone around them. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has rules with a whole bunch of people tied to names like a Heather Hansen and a Joe DeMoro, a John DeMoro, and people I don't know the names of from campuses I went to, involved with mayors in a whole bunch of different countries, and foreign and domestic medical families, like private tied to them, and too. The difference of them, all sides in criminal and civil cases, and in the court next to the World Trade Center and the World Trade Center attack. Our names involved interstates with WFSB and intercities in parallel with international at the same time. A whole bunch of people tied to people named Scalora have been involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with a whole bunch of foreign and domestic, intelligence, and that's including foreign and domestic military involved with the World Trade Center attack next to it in New York City. Interstates as the ones also intercities and intra-campuses too. Also with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart that were first forced, and there were other natures of use /s of that. Also relative to recorded were discernible, tactically juxtaposed predicate acts with facts methods, sickly distinctly upon each campus, but also sickly non-distinctly. And the difference between that too is there is function with that, where and how there are self-value roles, with what that causes too. Blamed on other things, others ourselves. Right, where and how nature is demonstrating that too, and our founders did. Right, where and how totally different people that don't even know each other, different industries, quote, experts, unquote, still tools, blaming other things, others ourselves. Right, where experts, syntax, and nature is supposed to be forcing and allowing. They're preventing people of free speech. So you guys have missed how nature shows it, how it is functional, that we can be led by a hyper invisible but still discernible and checkable to make sure we're not messing up. In other words, it is the one that has bound 3 parts of time that we know are true always. We know to an extent the past that was true always. We know what is active now that is true always to an extent. And we know what is to come. See? Okay, be careful. Have a great time. Vaccines. So in other words, Robert DeNiro, the presidents want us to discern, it's declassified. A whole bunch of reasons they're forced to not tell on things for a whole bunch of reasons that have nothing to do. No, in other words, they're not secrets. It's just secret because just like doctors can't go into homeopathic medicines with people because it takes too much time, and they're not. Everyone's not trained for that. In other words, for example, even if they're doctors, In other words, when people are debating, the nature of debate contains quality aspects of nature itself as value that is being and has been used to keep consciously other things, others, or selves blamed for things America's founders and that nature itself communicates for us to blame on the breaching method, the human fact treating nature breaching method that caused slavery. That's one of the things that was true always. If you examine what slavery was about, you know, what it is about. One of the things it's about is a human fact treating nature breaching method that demonstrably more probably than what is described about ancient republic for which we stand in its campuses system and pantheism. They could no longer afford the sciences unabridged, voices by that, revelations by that, guidance by that, because there is one identity that all share, and it is the greatest part of their identity. All exceptions in exception nature come with demonstrations of how it is making hyper additional nature. See, we are temporary slash lasting, positive slash negative, the way it is equally to all parts of itself. But with Earth and with ourselves as this hyper-additional, um, a concentrated, a special difference, temporary, for lasting, temporary slash lasting quality of diffusion of the complete identity of as all nature, as the identity of space slash existence, to the extent we could discern, as that identity of truth that has us bound, those three parts of time, past, active, and like the seasons, to an extent we know about the future's value here now as its own identity, even though it's not here, even if it never comes. That's an unabridged system. In other words, see, but this has been all its natural values have been reassigned. Black pupils, whites of eyes, have been, the communications by that have been reassigned tactical ulterior from what is positive onto nature, not as criminal insidiousness nature or positive, let alone not as criminal insidiousness natures or positive, employed multi-front with negatives to keep from discernment the identity of the breaching method that is again forced, and it forced all to roles, and our founders were extorted and tortured, and we are still prevented free speech on that, which is also because of the slavery method, fact treating nature, therefore physically. So even of our founders, they communicate for us to understand why and how this thing sickly distinctly hurt everyone and used all natural differences, all made up differences, tactical terror from how nature uses difference. Nature is showing us we have the same color eyes, we have different color eyes at the same time. We are being shown about difference, except where we have different color eyes at the same time too. With the exceptions part, the hella part, nature is communicating about exceptions as it. See, as one identity of volume that is inseparable from all others. And each identity of volume has a distinct identity of relationship to itself as its identity of volume to the extent we could discern. And with any subject, individually grouped or together, simultaneously. It comes with the slash hyper simultaneous, but to whatever extent we could discern of that which is true always, it comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself, equally valued, and with the value of that, three ways equally increasing. And the ancients and more probably and demonstrably than would have taught that 3 natures of 0 and 1 came about at the same time. Now, just like nature does, the breaching method does tactical tear from how nature does, but it's a mimic of it where it makes singular things blamed for its singular breaching method /S, where and while and how all location /S everywhere the human species body was and is. Since before modern religious messengers came about, the form of the ancient sciences have been following its hyperdifference, how to cause negative, positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures and means out of nowhere, especially differentially where we are physical, especially differentially where we are back treatment nature. And see, this breaching method employed criminal insidiousness natures of positive out of negatives, where and how it employed those negatives and rolls with those negatives, which and or too, with blaming on other things, others or selves, rolls with those negatives, rather than the breaching method, which sickly, non-distinctly had slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, through countries that were fighting with themselves. Because and or two, natures of peace with themselves as criminal insidious natures of peace, collusions with other people fighting with them. The difference of that too. There's a quality of fact treatment nature that is forced outside of courts originally and still. It never went away. A fake difference. There are collusions with people on off the state of Connecticut corrections offices and the judicial branch offices. With all sides of the World Trade Center attack, there are recorded proofs consciously a breaching method used the Americans and the Saudis remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, incapable of allowing discerned what the beginning of the Old Testament and the beginning of the Quran say right at the beginning. So you as collusions, these are people who want to speak like Robert DeNiro speaking about, the president doesn't do his homework. Everyone wants to force economic debate. Everywhere the species body is, everyone's entertaining economies, tactical ulterior from how our founders communicated for us. All exceptions, exception nature that appear to be a demonstration of other. They come with demonstrations of the same thing. You guys are not free capitalism. You have not free capitalism yet. And communism is not free yet either. Because it wasn't about communism. It's a style to get through. Hyper-criminally foreign influenced possession over all natures of unity and of all natures of differences with people at all locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body stands. It just how the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, with slavery entrenched sickly distinctly north and south, the suburbs, and how they had the laws to measure and maintain that no one could even speak about that, or they were in trouble if they were found out speaking outside of internationally monitored conversation. And we know that was a predicate acts with facts method being sustained on the human species bodies already, even on the colonists, not just the Native Americans that had already had this long sustained on them. We know the databases were criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions are up, incapable of having discerned any part of anything true, let alone by this method that leads by what is true always, not denying the slight sequence. Like sequence shifts are styles, are mass. increasingly overt criminal enterprises, private ones, in a whole bunch of different countries at each age of everyone's life. The difference between them or our own homelands, people, they in other words, they're also faking conversations with people that don't even know each other at all, like a Joshua Julian is one of the ones involved with Connecticut's courts and people at Harvard Hospital with child offenders, sexual, medical, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military, all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes and delusions with psychiatry. Like, for example, with the people involved with New York City schools who are further involved with the principal child offender and fabricating audio and video with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, Thaddeus Grabowski, is involved with kids from schools I went to that I never had classes with. And there's one named Mike DeMay, who has been planting evidences at corners of the streets. In other words, one exception I saw him off campus, and there's like another half exception where he yelled something out, but I never had communications with him there at Rick San Fagiolino's house. There are judges and prosecutors and a whole bunch of people that work with the courts in different capacities, involved with people along various natures of courts too, along Hangdog Lane and Two Rod Highway through time, and its conjunctions, who I don't know at all, and ones that went out of their way to pretend other behind my back and to make fake exception and lie about that, what's actually recorded with that. And increasingly, people tied to body dumping spots. Sal Civiello was one of the people with Facebook people that run Facebook, and the FBI, and some courts, and I have a Sal Civiello and others in his area involved with his neighbors with some untimely deaths and murders, and people named next to body dumping spots. Also involved with predicate acts with fax methods next to the state judicial branch offices, as the names involved here, and next to the state corrections offices, and next to campuses, roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, where and how, for example, when we examine how nature demonstrates what slavery was about, and how our founders demonstrated, communicated for us to understand this. There are self-valued roles with uses of America's founders' words, leaving out what they declassified about that, leaving out about how the breaching method sensed everyone collusions against themselves. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including if it was a majority of people, as the body sensing, going against the rule, including if it was everyone. This is a method that had been perfected since before America's founders were before religious messengers had been born. This is before America's founders, before Russia's founders, before China's founders. The suits and ties, the counters and exceptions have self-valued roles with suburbs, let alone the cities. The nature of debate regarding it contains quality aspects of nature that are criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions wrought. The only reason this hasn't been brought out at locations, at campuses, at places where there are databases ties to ourselves before that, and then further at the campuses, actually. See, these are systems, the campus, the republic for which we stand, America. This has been an abridged form of itself since semi-ancient times, per a breaching method. This is why and how to heal it, we have to appreciate the value of what unabridged constitution is, and why and how they had to hide their actual identities. In other words, and that's why they had to leave slavery entrenched. That's why they had to force the North and South to fight against it. What with the North, the one set up with the industry, but also as the North one still rolls with it, and sickly distinctly worse some ways than the South was, like speaking for the sciences, like therefore the law, morality, psychology, psychiatry. Psychiatry is involved with distinct natures of organized crime and with foreign slash hyperforeign use slash s of that exploited here and there. Our intelligence agencies. There was a Judge Napolitano. He has a Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. Since before he left Fox News has roles with the FBI and with Connecticut courts, and with worse than criminal incompetence of New York courts and interbranch and intelligence tied to them, as their roles with WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, faked conversations with me, with themselves, and with others about the World Trade Center attack. And note how they replaced the outcome actually recorded with legal cases by lying about. Fake conversations with me about legal cases, too, as people at Hartford Hospital also did this. Increasingly, people at Hartford Hospital have roles with untimely deaths, and people from other areas that influence confessions and demonstrations on my street to roles with them with that. Increasingly, Hartford Hospital has people with the name Dylan involved with them, with foreign and domestic military. A whole bunch of people I don't even know at all, like a Joshua Julian, is involved with digital crimes, with whiting forensics with them through time, and state police families interstates, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and three branches of government switching and forging names, involved as collusions with names on all sides of the cases at the same time and their sources, as the ones increasingly involved with predicate acts with me, against me, leading up to the World Trade Center. I was in the Ninth Circuit Court as an observer right before the World Trade Center attack. The Ninth Circuit Appeals Court is right next to the World Trade Center. See, and these are people involved with lying about the outcomes of cases. They have collusion with the federal criminals in. Whole bunch of foreign and domestic medical families with badges that are faking and having fake transcripts. Increasingly, their roles with the families that are involved with police phones, including of the FBI and Weathersfield Police, as ones with DeMoro, Cololo, and O'Brien increasingly have wire crime acts and methods of mixed natures through the years, as their roles with increasingly falsified police reports stacked into databases behind people's back. They prevent writing on a mass scale. Even when they catch people doing things that they're actual, they're changing and faking that. They attach me fake locations, fake ties to a subby Bajario. I wasn't with him. I don't know where he stole the radios from. And then also they have roles with these. It has something to do with their roles with people at the corners of on Griswold Street. Have people that have been lying about me through time. A Mark Violet, a Justin Stryker, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have by students and adults at Trinity College. They have roles with my neighbors planting predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, evidence is fake, letter, changed, digital. And when I put exception, in other words, I never left a message, a letter for Hugh Ogden, the English professor. The FBI and other people have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they pretended other. And these are also people involved with the Joshua Stryker and with the Joshua Schumacher, with the proven principal child defender, and others like with the name Kerr and DeMoro that have roles, and Perone, who have roles next to Fox Connecticut News, also with child defenders through time, but also as their roles with the courts with that. See, they're keeping sense and sensibilities of people that have a theater nature of good. But since you're little, in other words, you can't understand good if you don't understand the black people's white divide. You guys blame for other things other than yourselves, which causing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in the suburbs, let alone the cities, and let alone regarding that insidiously. Why and how through other apparent motivations, natures, and needs and interests that even they don't understand the ones having them and having had them, where they have the syntax and nature, fact treatment, nature qualities, and debate, where they call it debate regarding Hartford's being a suburban / urban, described syntactically as a suburban / urban. Because again, before America's founders were born, there are homes that were built. And this is across the globe, from America to Russia to Ukraine. There is a tactically denatured landscape theater, where it is the ground, the Earth's identity, its identity relationship to itself, as a hyper-additional nature too, with like water, gases. In other words, it's showing us, it teaches us about positive or negative, tactical terror from we are, from what we are for. We are forbid. The quality of fact treatment nature that won't leave out the smallest finite detail. So the presidents want us to call them out. In other words, they don't have, at countries A through Z, the leaders, they don't have legal people of competence to deal with black people's whites of eyes having been assigned by a breaching method. The campuses that train the lawyers at countries A through Z, they have roles of predicate acts for facts methods, a certain type of victim / hyper victim only allowed to be fathomable or sensed, but for motivations everyone missed. You can't know, but you're not going to discern this breaching method you exploiting itself also as a distinct singular identity of hyper invisible but still discernible, per the phenomenon of how the only hyper invisible but still discernible, lasting identity of an identity of relationship to itself and value of that. In other words, this is that body that has the other species bodies with two eyes, distinctly from ourselves, but non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, to show us the / in the hyper simultaneous part. There are three distinct ways. It is hyper invisible, but still discernible. In other words, the same identity that has us those three parts of time, past, active now, and to come. So in other words, they need people fighting with each other. They need people to or to be unity with each other, and or to have the difference used exactly the way the breaching method wanted it needs at campuses A through Z. And especially discernible in New York City, but in some ways more so at Wethersfield, Connecticut, where there is the witch trials place right next to where George Washington had to come with James Madison's plan, enabled by the founders behind him and his plan, and counter-extort, but still leave slavery entrenched, northern colonies, southern colonies, but counter-extort at Connecticut. So then winning the last battle of the Revolutionary War. Still, those locations are involved with identity theft, fraud, slander methods that are singularly consciously used, being and haven't been used, as names involved with the World Trade Center attack, as names that the breaching method for. In other words, there's not just the sides like Saudi Arabia and America, because the Americans forced Saudi, but the Americans were being used remotely simultaneously because there were a whole bunch of different countries involved there with it. People with the name DeNiro, a whole bunch of people from Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have collusions with people with the intelligence community at corners of streets, like the corner of Town Line Drive and South Street Highway. And I believe it's Morgan Circle. There's a Kerr family is one of the ones involved with Officer Jerry Miller, involved with planting evidences on all sides of my house, and with Facebook, with the FBI, and more with the principal upskirt nature, with the pictures with the kids, and with other natures of organized crime with them, and more sexual and medical offenders of kids. There are whole families, men and women at Harvard Hospital with the name Leahy, and family members of one's named Lombardo. Increasingly have roles of predicate acts of facts. People from other areas on my street since I was a kid, planting evidence as fake ties, fake natures ties to me. Sequence shifts. It has something to do with their roles with the name Scalora. DeNiro and Collusions also said that that's their cousin years ago. I only know them making confessions relative to what I recorded at each of the campuses. And how I recorded this discernible is also relative to how I recorded them pretending others recorded than it actually is, not just against me and everyone. And they're putting fake motivations for it because the breaching method needs to keep its motivation. It rolls with everyone's motivations, even though nature is demonstrating it, and even though it knows our founders communicated for us to understand about the breaching method's uses of of motivations narratives. The reason people were motivated to have roles with slavery is because if they spoke up against it, there was a breaching method entrenched that would have them sensed. And if they got away with it, then the people who didn't sense them for the breaching method and those people would eventually be sensed, and everyone would be hurt, tricked, killed, and worse. And so everyone stayed a complete possession / hyper possession and looks through contrast. Well, at least I'm better off than them. So there's not, in other words, this breaching method has complete possession over all natures of sophistication. That's why and how not one. That's why and how the colonists, wanted to have better built. There are proofs that they was sustained tactically denaturing Native American waters. Nature itself, they took out plants no more. They took plants to extinction. There are proofs to keep people on value nature systems, like with food, like needs for water. In other words, forgiveness is not to go after, okay, get the people who are bottling the plastic. In other words, we have to leave out blame and stay on the principles. And then you'll get better at doing blame right. In other words, that if you want to care about the country and you're worried about, like Donald Trump, we don't know him. Barack Obama, we didn't know him. We don't know him. But we know they both failed. Even great men trying to do great, but they both failed to communicate for what our founders communicated because they came through campuses. In many ways better than mine. But some way /S, every campus has a part that's better than every other one. For example, it's a hyper-archaeological evidence how it is named campus. Black pupils in boxing. So they went to training camp. In other words, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling were originally led by the identity that has a volume of itself that is grouped, has a volume of itself that is the finite or the order of finite, has a body of itself that is progressive, that is only gaining. And these three parts, they come also, in other words, those 3 parts of time we know are true always the past to an extent. The extent now we know is true all the way into extent to the future. But it also comes with us knowing that there's a part before that we don't know about. It also comes with us knowing that there are active grouped truths that we don't know about. It also comes with us knowing that there are future values that we don't know about, even though they're about here now, just like the seasons. But this is not the only thing it is. Time, the identity of the forever nature, that we have the extent of the discernment of means to discern. Again, it comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself, equally valued in the value of that, equally valued three ways. And this generated three identities of zero. It is functional how it has distinct parts of itself. And so, please, Robert DeNiro, please have it's not so respect. Not if you, in other words, if you want to deal with it, and also you guys try to fish. You fish, like in other words, oh, they're going to go after one agency but not the others. This is guilty. In other words, you break it down from that, and also you guys use other people's reporting. And the law says that only an individual can speak for themselves. Me, I've been attached to fake communications and to changed communications with everyone around me, including my family, and still since I was a kid. As the people that timed collusions leading up to the World Trade Center attack, intercities and interstates and internationally. Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they had collusion with predicate acts with the FBI director in his defendant capacities too, since before that and after it, with his co-defendants and their lawyer too, increasingly involved with Wethersfield town offices too, and people all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield. Our names involved with predicate acts at Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, from off the campuses with judges, prosecutors, and their family members involved with the same house/S, with the names involved with the untimely deaths at Trinity College, even if it was made up, and on my street with the Robert Reed confessions that also brought up the name Scalora and brought up the principal child abusers campus. And it brought up a lot more than that. And also brought it up such all at once to pretend I ever had a conversation with him. He also has roles with one of the people involved with the World Trade Center attack as our side's roles as victims, which I don't want in 1,000 years. In other words, they have self-valued roles and needs to pretend other because they're refusing to identify themselves too, as their roles with the ones with Oliveri too, a Scalora, Mark Violet, people with the name Zeno. That they said they're people with the name Puzo, also involved at Trinity College with them, with predicate acts. With these are people involved with proven child abusers, leaders of the kids, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police reports, roles, all kinds of federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, relative to that's one of the things that was sickly, non-distinctly against every single person and our founders. But you guys are incapable of affording discerned, proper appreciation of the extortion of George Washington, our first president, let alone our founders, behind James Madison and his plan, and as him, and that plan that George Washington agreed to use, which was only capable of strength, only capable of leaving things like slavery entrenched for and by the breaching method. Roles with that, you can't build a unity, you can't build an independence. Exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Because it can't either. It has to hide behind that. Because nature, that's part of how nature shows us the breaching method. As a scientific value, too. That name is the scientific value. It's one of the things that is true always. What slavery was about. The singular breaching method, for example, it used tactics involve a whole bunch of multiple different things, like having other things, others, or selves blamed, besides the breaching method, while nature was demonstrating the breaching method. And while it knew that founders would come and demonstrate there's a breaching method, but it knew they would have to do so through declassified things to come out afterwards. And it also knew that there wouldn't be one body capable of appreciating that because all bodies had state collusion, but with suits and ties, counters and exceptions, even when fighting with themselves, even if not realizing, as a collusion, screening and sensing to maintain no quality of fact should be nature. Proper is gonna make convictions with short words, let alone their protraction. So there are all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes causing all kinds of natures and methods of organized crime. That with psychiatry, for example, and the difference between them are the ones or the people of work criminal enterprises, private ones, the patients and criminals. The unmarked police forms associated with them. The court's family members, the fire departments, relative to their roles with Russians, still there were proofs that they have the fire department have roles with something to do with the nuclear or whatever, because they have. And Inspector Mike is also with all sides of my house with confessions. People with Hartford Hospital and the fire department have been planting evidences with foreign and domestic military too. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they're being used to change what they said regarding their confessions, also with people from my grammar school through time and then as adults, regarding the Central Connecticut State University in Britain, Connecticut, has foreign and domestic military involved with child defenders, leaders of kids, attaching little kids to fake ties to other, fake natures of ties to other. Using, like, in other words, I sat against the wall one time because I didn't want to be rude to a girl with a Tim O'Brien who wanted me to. They were playing horse. They were playing fake horse, driving on a horse in the playground, and this is associated with them with they're not in classes. I never had a class with them. They're putting things. These are law identities that sense people that are going to speak proper for nature and for America's founders, because nature itself communicates for our founders and for nature itself. Tactical terrier, from how the experts could afford their. No, there are mayors, plural, associated with Tim O'Brien, Andrew O'Brien, and their parents, and their roles with neighbors with intelligence families. I never had a conversation with them. And like with the people with the name Cololo, Weathersfield police brought up the name Cololo. They didn't put the whole name. These are also people recorded involved with a Philip Cololo, involved with people with the name Mendez, and with a Bob Chase, with Whiting Forensics, also with a Joshua Julian, with further child offenders. Bob Chase also confessed to Phil Cololo, and the name Christine is involved with him, with predicate acts with facts. I'll forgive the Christine Bedard because she has educators that are also involved with John Mariano with predicate acts, and they lied to her with him. The difference between them as adults and kids too. And these are people also involved with the former Mayor Gold, and with people with the name Cololo, with sequential federal evidences crimes rules, with names next to Hartford Hospital through time, involved with the names near me, where they're putting fake with wire crimes, mail crimes, falsified police reports rolls with confessions. Everyone forced a whole bunch of police departments involved with them with this. I don't even know all the names. There are people involved with violence, credible threats of violence, using weapons, bug spray, poison, smoke. In other words, even sexual abuses of their own kids, self-value, because everyone's speaking through other, like with the Riley family and the roles with the religious, their Jew syntax with a Zeno, involved with people with his educators with predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and planting evidences at and next to campuses, intercities, with ones involved with predicate acts with facts, inter and intra campuses. In other words, it has something to do with their roles also with predicate acts methods at and next to the state judicial branch offices, and next to the state corrections offices. A Stephen Stocko is involved with Weathersfield police confessions and demonstrations of him involved with them with wire crimes. These are people with the FBI and state police and writing forensics increasingly involved with on-off the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. These are people that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's a Lance Cuddy involved. I never had a conversation with Lance Cuddy in my life, verbally. He's involved with also a Daryl Sullivan and people at Park Street locations involved with the FBI and foreign and domestic military and foreign and domestic criminal enterprises. Even if they're intelligence or what, they're involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with the family members of Hartford courts and the Britain Superior Court and Connecticut District Court, people associated with them before the World Trade Center attack. Involved also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their lawyer. Before the World Trade Center attack, they had roles with predicate acts intercities of Connecticut. And then leading up to the world, as the ones involved at the World Trade Center, names next to it, like a Claudia Scalora, and people involved with them, let's say their family members. And the Ninth Circuit Court, all sides of that case, their sources, and the court itself postdated to make appear late what had been brought to the court and stamped timely, delivered to the court timely. The date had been changed. That was right before the World Trade Center attack. In the World Trade Center attack context, there was worse than just a scam, as collusion /S. And part of that was proven about how the court too did that in there. But these are increasingly people involved with like name switching police forms in courts that are refusing to identify themselves. Also with a judge in Napolitano. So, for example, you have a guy who's supposed to be sophisticated, Mr. DeNiro. In other words, I had a lot of respect for Mr. DeNiro. And then, fix it, please, Mr. DeNiro. In other words, think about it. I mean, it's disgusting, too. No. The animal could pretend that sophistication spoke. In other words, fake sciences speak for New York City clearer than day. There are juxtaposed predicate acts with facts methods upon the people of New York City. Sickly distinctly if they are kids, sickly distinctly if they are middle-aged, and sickly distinctly if they are elderly. This is a multi-front method by how it sounds sickly non-distinctly left out, but people speaking for integrity anyway. Real integrity appreciates the difference between things, how they are distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, also conjunction with the / hyper-simultaneous vaccines. In other words, this breaching method kept all rules, keeping identities wanting and needing, things like wars. In other words, the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born for the torture, extortion, and fact-cheating nature slavery of themselves. The only reason that appears debatable is relative to this. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves, fake locations with themselves and others, and about the World Trade Center attack, while I caught them forcing a principal child defender. And rolls with it on all sides of the kids' houses. There's also a teacher from Weathersfield on Morgan Circle, at least in the past, associated also with Eric Jensen with state police families interstates, involved on Morgan Circle with foreign and domestic military, Marines, involved with remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano, criminally foreign impulse, tactically delusions raw, fact nature, quality aspects of nature, from the worst judges to the best, relative here. black pupils. Here, in other words, Donald Trump, President / Chief Trump, said that he doesn't want war. You know, when they say other, you're supposed to bring that up and still really want, but in other words, follow mandated law, please. Get me off the big conversation about the World Trade Center attack. This shows that there is a sick nature of fake integrity that attaches people that were in the World Trade Center attack, interstates and intercities, to fake conversations with themselves and with the news at the same time. So you guys are leaking. I just remind. These people next to the news locations are also involved with the security next to the state capitol, used criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. You guys have nerve speaking about mental health. You're tactically delusions raw. All kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes and rackets with the lawyers and the intelligence at Harvard Hospital. Also involved with the World Trade Center attack and the counters, the translators, their educators, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. And from off campuses too. They're trying to make the court, because the courts are involved too. The difference between the courts, the police forms, the foreign and domestic intelligence. All you do is have styles that pretend they need to pretend their integrity while they're not exactly the way the breaching method showed them to speak for the law. As collusion / as. All kinds of Sandy Hook corruption. For example, all there are. Please follow mandated law, because you guys are leaking. You have fake conversations about, I can't get a response from a doctor, even mental health people, with the fake conversations with me, the other ones. And the ones I did try to ask for help, they got scared. And then they changed their fake conversations with me. I didn't even have time to have a conversation with them about that. They also bring up their family and start getting scared. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles with the body dumping spot of a serial killer, even if that was made up. That serial killer himself, even if it was unmarked police form in a Sandy Hook prison, involved with the people that forced the principal child abuser not told on, and the untimely deaths, and the intercities roles with murders that were brought up at the same time, and predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, people lying about me to the people at all the Connecticut boxing gyms, and interstates. See, people involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their lawyers that are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence since they were kids. Black pupils. When did integrity speak? You guys want to have a danger? Oh, well, we believe that there has to be integrity. In other words, we'll have a lot of settle in the court. Obviously, the courts don't have the integrity here or there. That's why they can't enforce the quality here. They're changing digital evidences. WFSB has roles with the FBI and with Connecticut police departments and police forms with the same house / S, with whole wire crime acts, methods, mail crimes, and stacking predicate acts with facts, collusions, and differences rackets. You're gonna observe where and how people speak about their cultures as little tools. Culture, black pupils, whites of eyes. This is culture. We are showing that other species bodies have culture. This culture too, distinctly but non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Per what is also / hyper simultaneously. We are discerning. We're going to discern how it is. Nature shows us its complete identity, has a function for all the other semi-natures of identities, relationship to itself. Where we are complete, we are completed by its identity. We can ignore its complete identity relationship. So, in the value of it here. But it shows us, it forces it from here. Lease of Hadith, not as death, but as forced negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. That's why the soil is degraded every year for so long, even in the suburbs, let alone the cities. In other words, we're in a trap. We're in a semi-ancient trap. All rat vaccines. I teach us things, but long. So that quality of factor, they need other things, others themselves. They need to hide behind communication. They describe all sides of people's communications with they're faking that too. And leaving out the people describing it too. Criminally foreign tactically delusions raw. Forgiveness is because where we can discern the breaching method and other things others themselves blamed without scientific value. In other words, certain type of victim / hyper victim being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, pretending they could speak about free speech. Self-value roles, making self-valuing fake exceptions to get away with it. That's why you guys aren't following mandated law. I've been asking for help before the World Trade Center attack. Hartford courts, people on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and all sides of depositions, like ones associated with, there was also the name McCord. I don't know them. A DeNiro family. In other words, I was around them 1 year for some football practices. In other words, and that was only because of confessions of and demonstrations of a Jonathan Mariano involved with sequence ships and people on all sides in that Hartford hospital involved with the World Trade Center attack, too, and also with the DeMar's Market there, and with the ILO's Kitchen, involved with them with identity theft, fraud, claims, planting federal evidence as crimes, collusions at crime scenes, not the way they're pretending. Has something to do with their roles, too, inter and intra campuses with their educators, with breaking extra facts. And the news at the same time, these are the ones involved with this. Please get them on paper, one name in sequence with the police and the courts that forge and switch names, Judge Napolitano. And then please observe how they're being taught to think with the premises that are non-premises of the Judge Napolitano. In other words, the presidents and leaders of other countries, their souls want us addressed to address where and how they're forced to entertain. With no, they don't want to entertain. But in other words, to call them out, but not like that. In other words, you're just roles screening and keeping, keeping the courts as collusions. The difference between the courts and police forms. There's all kinds of rackets putting with the campuses. Not legitimate syntax spoke for a reason, or it spoke for morality. Black pupils. We will observe how the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts of nature while being a criminal and sinister nature of theater. More and more incapable of discerning because of having been shown more and more the only means to cause positive value nature progressions. Acts of nature as if to self-value roles with those being criminal insidiousness natures of means to cause positive. And like truths used for lies. Please stop calling names to people and get them on paper. One name in sequence. Let's go. Let's go. These are people that are teaching the kids. Well, watch what I caught them doing between campuses, too. Follow mandated law, because a whole bunch of countries involved. Work, criminal enterprises, and private ones. See how they use the name family when they're speaking for Italy or Italians. They're using the word family because they have their overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, collusions with the interbranch foreign and domestic. Intelligence, the difference between that. In other words, per worse, and the names next to the news locations, because they have adults and kids, and the difference of that all used remotely, where they're putting fake and changed, what's actually recorded. So it has something to do with their roles with the news too, planting federal predicate acts roles with acting professors. There are proofs that that's because they have unmarked police forms, and they have words. They were already shown that they use words like maturity or immature, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrought. They can't afford to have that discerned. That's why they can't afford to have mandated law followed. So Weathersfield police increasingly have roles with names from other areas with predicate acts on my street, and they're playing games. They're shown by this breaching method. They conduct between everyone using conversations with themselves about themselves and others leaving out the breaching methods roles with other names with this. A whole bunch of different countries, like people from Korea, are involved with the ones named Kololo, um, DeMoro, Ray Reynolds, Eric Jensen, and Mike Roberts with state police families, and Joshua Julian. Joshua Julian's also involved with Facebook, with the FBI, and whiting forensics, with digital crimes, with the campuses and at the kids' houses. Fear. Next to crime scenes of all natures. All kinds of things were brought up at once intercities by after the World Trade Center attack too, by the people that were brought it up. In other words, I recorded stuff before the World Trade Center attack. The courts and the FBI and foreign countries affected requests for help from people involved with them to me. And they, in other words, per, per their collusion they force with use of location /s syntactically, names and instances description, and or names and instances description wise. Again, too, I'm putting proofs here now. I'm conscious that the programming method uses the programming method I'm going to use reveal it appreciates lists in ways that they can't afford to discern. The people that have been appreciating lists with the readings of laws and statutes and like towards artificial intelligence. Also, YouTube, if you could hear this, you guys did a good job on anticipating. No, I didn't sign up to participate with the program, but they put boxing, and I clicked it so you could see this because there are people from off YouTube, like with the name Joshua Julian and with the name Ray Collusions, who are involved with people with some guns and knives and poisons threats and wire crimes with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, through time. And the police are refusing to identify themselves. They put a whole bunch of fake things through time. Every time they come here, I don't communicate with them, barely communicate, and they change fake conversations with me. Because they have people that fake conversations with me as a kid. I never went to the police station as a kid. The ones who did go to the police station and give police reports, like Chris Walters, they did that to make it look like I knew him before that. Just one time we drove to a school, I didn't even communicate with him in the car. They have something to do with a Ray Collusions, a Chris Walters. They both different years apart. They confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed. They're people with the name Charlie Bowes and others next involved with them. Charlie Bowes, I never had a class with him. Never had a conversation, never around him. In other words, the only time I saw him was near Fox Connecticut News. Involved also with a whole bunch of people tied to it. Enzo Fienza, who lives across the street from the South Sevilla, increasingly involved with people tied to body dumping spots and whiting forensics, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and their confessions and demonstrations of it tied to people that were in my classes in like South Sevilla. I never had a conversation with them on campus ever. I only it was in my fourth grade class. I never even saw him in a parking in like outside of the school, even on the ground. One time, there's one exception. I went to a Cub Scout meeting. It was him and his one of his neighbors, and those are also neighbors involved with body dumping spots. Increasingly, time use /s of them, like the body dumping spot at Billy Grasso, involved also with confirmed confessions by strangers like Enzo Fienza, who made all these confessions to me at once as a stranger. Also regarding his cousins that lived right across the street from South CVL, the kid that was in my fourth grade class. And my fifth grade class has a Mr. Abruzzi, increasingly involved also with people with kids and adults with confessions at Central Connecticut State University when I was a kid and then as an adult. They had predicate acts with them with that. And with their putting fake evidences, fake ties, fake natures of ties between kids and sequence shifts has something to do with the roles of the World Trade Center attack too, with the names involved, like the name Scalora. And so Mr. Abruzzi, I never had a conversation with him. In other words, the closest we came to it one time. He told me to do a maze, and Joe DeNiro was a part of the maze, and I was in fifth grade. Already, my third grade class. There was, in other words, there were already people involved with predicate acts. They're showing kids that their families are involved with predicate acts. The kids speaking for culture, and, like overt criminal enterprises, private ones, or the interbranch too, at the same exact time. The intelligence, the difference of that. You want to follow about culture, follow about how nature showing us its identity when we discern that, how it has manifest the other species' bodies, quality aspects in nature, distinctly from our own, but also non-distinctly, and simultaneously, again, slash hyper-simultaneous vaccines. So New York City, please, they're using the experts who jump into people's conversations the way they're not supposed to if you really read the law, but then they say, oh, you're a lawyer. They're lying. The only reason they're getting away with it is because this predicate act method uses the database side of it and rolls with the difference of it there. Because there are collusions there from off the campuses that never went away, and they're only increasingly. In other words, all these countries were shared here and there sick fakes together to hide behind by the breaching method. All natures of different, all exception nature, demonstration, the same thing. You guys can't defend one culture. No, let alone the species, the human species body of individual bodies with the group differences generated by hyper difference culture. Vaccines, I teach us things, but long. So please, WFSB, please do what's right and get me the names of or get me the name of who disbelieves. No, but it's all recorded anyway, too. That principal child offender. There are more people with the intelligence associated with you, with the fake conversations with me, with that. An FBI director and Whiting Forensics. There are more people tied to Joshua Julian. And these are not legitimate roles. Representatives of the South and of the North, with our still sides, forced by our founders, but also forced by themselves, fake, because the breaching method has that outcome, has complete possession of them. The breaching method read and reads, discerns what our founders discern better than the people teaching them, because they have that measured and maintained left out, changed. So how could they read Marbury versus Madison? Black pupils, peer. In other words, it's an insult to tell people it's about a T tax when slavery was